Haircut time.
I remember when I grew up in Cedar Rapids, you know, one of the big things was Iowa was first in the nation in education.
Yeah.
It was just like a point of pride. It was just automatic. I think I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think the Iowa test of basic skills was actually a test that they did in multiple states.
Yes,
because
correct.
It was, you know, that we were the standard.
That is correct. When you've underfunded education for 10 years, like, of course you're going to see a decline. And there's another quote that I like, I think it's a critic is someone who knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
I love that.
And the value of education is kind of hard to beat. If you want Iowa kids to have a good one, like, well, you gotta show me your budget and show me your values. You can't be underfunding it. I think that's a huge piece of the equation. It's just making sure that our schools have the resources they need to actually do a good job. You know, we've had the same people in charge for 10 years. They're clearly not focused on the things that ordinary Iowans want them to be focused on. So let's put different people in charge.
Well, and to that point, I think another thing that's come up is this notion of some of the most marginalized Iowans are also the ones who are being targeted with really, really restrictive legislation that actually is stripping rights away from people. And, you know, that's been an interesting thing too, Rob, coming back, dealing with the disconnect between that kind of legislation and the way that your typical Iowan actually interacts with the people around them.
How you treat people, yes, 100%.
It's been just so jarring.
Yeah.
It's like, who is this legislation serving?
Right.
And why is it coming about when so many Iowans are so great at accepting their neighbor and like finding out who needs help and then offering that help? And then you see this legislation that's just so targeting these folks.
Yeah.
How is that coming about and how can we change that?
All of that stuff is the people in charge are picking Iowans' pockets. They're handing out contracts to their friends, right? So taking away the power of the auditor's office to find misspent money. Like literally they passed a law that every single government watchdog in America said would lead to an increase in waste, fraud, and abuse. If they said anything, that's what they said. And so they do this stuff to distract and move the conversation over to something else that doesn't, frankly, impact everyone's life in Iowa.
Correct.
But that it divides people. And so their calculus in doing this stuff is if we can get people divided, then we can pick their pocket and they won't notice. I think you're exactly right the way you described it. Like I always say, we want Iowa's government to be as welcoming as Iowans are. And that doesn't mean that everybody gets exactly what they want. I think that's an important distinction to make. And I say everywhere I go, I don't think there's any group of people in the state of Iowa that is going to get 100% of what they ask from me. Because I think for myself, and I reason for myself, but the truth is, you know, when we have just become the first state ever to re-legalize discrimination in housing and re-legalize discrimination in employment against a group of people just because of who they are, like that's not moving in the right direction. And I don't think that's a thing that Iowans want. You know, they want people to be treated fairly, period. So that stuff to me is, a lot of that culture war stuff is just trying to distract Iowans from the fact that their pockets are being picked by the people who are in charge of government right now. And that's part of the reason why, at the end of the day, like my pledge is culture wars are over. If I get elected, I'm gonna veto every culture war bill. We're just done.
So with that much of a divide, how do you reach across the aisle without, you know, in a super polarized setting like this, how do you do it without offending the folks who support you? And then how do you attract the folks who you would need to make deals with?
So I think there's a couple of things to that. I think it's really important that you're willing to engage with people. Like I was saying, I've done, I think 800 town halls. We always notice them in advance. And so people are actually able, it's not like we, some people will go out and sneak into town and sneak out again before anybody knows they're there to just kind of check a box like, hey, I was physically present in this county. Yeah, right. We tell people in advance we're coming. If people want to criticize me, that's fine. I'll listen to their criticism. Oftentimes I'm able to give them information that they didn't have. That makes them go, oh, all right, I didn't know that. And I'm like, hey, that's why we're here, right? I think that the vast majority of people, they want to believe that they are good people. And if you give them an opportunity to do a good thing, and then they're going to want to take that. But if you don't bother to pick up the phone and call them, then it's easy for them to dismiss you and say, well, that person isn't trying to do the right thing. So if you pick up the phone and you actually offer to work with people and you point out like, hey, this is why this is a good idea, here's why that's a bad idea, we should do this and we should do it together, and I think that you'd want to join me because of X, Y, and Z, a lot of people go, yeah, I think you're right.
It's good to hear that there's a possibility of some reconciliation, even in this polarized atmosphere.
Because we talk about pride and being proud of Iowa, and there's a great Mark Twain quote that I always go back to. It's patriotism is loving your country all the time and your government when it deserves it. Like, I love Iowa. I love Iowans. It's all the same stuff that you were just talking about and that you were talking about. Like, people in this state, they will help you when you need help. They will treat you right. They want to do the right thing. And that is still the culture of the state of Iowa, even though the government of the state of Iowa is not reflective of that right now.
Super famous politician said that, like, you would never go to a steakhouse that was owned by vegans.
Dude, I say all the time. Did you know this? No, that was me? I love that. Thank you. This was awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, good talking to you guys. This was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Get some signs up.
You got it.
You know?
Absolutely.